Not all probiotics are created equal. New Purina Systemic Supplement remains live and active after the pelleting process and throughout the digestive system, making it all the way to the hind gut. Systemic was designed to support normal recovery after exercise and occasional gastrointestinal stress. Whether you're using a probiotic now or not, it's time to use a live and active supplement from a name you trust. Visit mq.purinamills.com to try a Purina Systemic Probiotic Supplement today. You're listening to Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family. Welcome to Sleep Stories for Equestrians. I'm your host, Ashley Winch. We're so happy you're here to relax and unwind. If you fall asleep and miss the story, we will recap it at the beginning of the next episode. We've also selected and edited these stories for ultimate relaxation, removing any stressful bits without affecting the story's integrity, so you can focus on drifting off to sleep. With that, let's settle down and prepare for our story. The gates are closed, the horses sleep, the day's work done, the chores complete. Now let us rest, our bodies and minds. Drift off to sleep and close your eyes. It's time for us to turn down for the night. Now let's breathe in, breathe out, and turn off the light. One more time. Breathe out, breathe in. Now, let us begin. Horses and jobs. Its many uses have made the horse very valuable to man. In keeping horses and in using them, many thousands of people have found work. Building beautiful carriages for people to ride in was once a craft in which many men made their living. Some of our modern automobile body makers began by making carriage bodies. Somebody had to drive the horses. Coachmen had to be well trained and skillful drivers. They sat up on their high boxes and handled their horses in all kinds of weather. Teamsters drove heavy wagons in the cities, carrying freight between the railroads and ships and the warehouses. They were proud of their big, powerful horses and of their expert driving. Generations of innkeepers owed their bread and butter to horsemen and to travelers who went by coach. The inns they stayed at were the first hotels. Many a boy in those days learned to make fine harness for his living. First, he had to spend a long time learning from an expert harness worker. Saddle makers were still busy men. They make fine Western saddles for cowboys and fine English saddles for riders in the park. You can still find blacksmith shops in some of our towns. Horses must wear shoes of iron, and from time to time, these need repairing or replacing. People who ride need special clothes. Bootmakers make riding boots from rich, glowing leathers for cowboys and for people who ride for pleasure and for sport. Tailors design riding costumes for riding and for hunting. Special hats are worn for riding, but the cowboy prefers the blue jeans he calls Levi's and his Western hat. it was not always possible for city people to keep a horse and carriage. Thousands of people found work in renting horses and carriages to other people. You can still hire a horse or a carriage to ride in the park. Hay and feed stores still sell corn, hay, oats, bran, and other foods to people for their horses. Many girls and boys want to be animal doctors or veterinarians when they grow up. Then they can treat sick horses and other animals. Violin bows are made of long white hairs from horses' tails. Horses in the making of our nation. There were no horses on the American continent when the Spanish explorers brought 16 of them from Havana, Cuba in 1519. 17 actually arrived in North America because a young horse was born along the way. What happened to all the horses, Eohippus and the others? There was once a land bridge, a strip of land that reached from North America to Asia. The horses in America, in their wanderings, found this strip of land, and many of them traveled by slow stages into Asia and then into Europe. Some of them wandered southward down the length of North America and found another strip of land, the Isthmus of Panama. Crossing over this land bridge, they spread out through South America. At last, all the horses that stayed in North and South America died out. We can only guess why they became extinct. There were no meat-eating animals that could have eaten all the horses. There was plenty of good grass in both North and South America. Perhaps it was some sickness that killed them off. We really do not know. After the early horses disappeared, there were no more horses in the Americas until the Spaniards brought the modern horse from Europe. The horses that the Spaniards brought here have helped America to grow into a strong nation. Let's see what part horses have played in the growth of our nation. The early Spaniards used their horses to explore the New World. They found good places to build cities. They discovered wide rivers and pleasant valleys. Word of their discoveries reached the other countries of Europe, and people wanted to come to the new land to live. The early colonists depended upon the horses they brought with them from Europe to do the heavy work of hauling lumber for their homes. They also needed horses to keep in touch with the growing towns and cities in the New World. Mail was carried on horseback and by coach. The first pioneers found out about the West by exploring the new land. Horses made this exploring possible. When the pioneers came back to tell of the great land in the West, whole families, even whole villages, went west. They sometimes traveled in Conestoga wagons, the covered wagon of the American plains. Riders on horseback protected these long lines of prairie schooners from attack by unfriendly Native Americans. As people found places where they wanted to live, they settled. Villages grew into towns, and towns grew into cities. Before the Pony Express in 1860, mail between the East and California had to go by ship, wagon train, and stagecoach. Pony Express riders galloped the mail from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California, nearly 2,000 miles in 8 days. Horses were changed about every 10 miles for the whole distance. As the West opened up and the settlers discovered how rich the land was, they found they needed more and more horses. Some were used for farm work. Many were used by cowboys who looked after the great herds of cattle that fed on the grasses of the plains. There was nothing more important to a cowboy than his horse, and he took good care of it at all times. Before the railroads were built across the country, the wagon trains carried freight and the stagecoaches carried passengers. It took many weeks of hard driving to cross the country from coast to coast. When the trail was cut by a river, the people built big rafts to float their wagons and coaches to the other side. After the railroads were built, wagon trains and stagecoaches were used only for travel between areas not served by the railroad lines. When the automobile was introduced, the stagecoach disappeared except in old stories of the West. But without the horse, the West might have remained an unsettled region for a long, long time. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Sleep Stories for Equestrians. Allow this music to gently carry you off to sleep.